What's going on YouTube? So a brand's entry point is very important since it often brings in new customers that might stay for life. That's why we're spending the day with the refreshed 2020 BMW X1, the most affordable BMW with a starting price just a little over $35,000. So with that all said, let's go ahead and see if this X1 is good enough to bring in new customers and keep them around. So of course, no refresh would be complete without an updated front design, and that is the case here with this 2020 X1. So what BMW has done is basically enlarged the kidney grille. They've also linked it here in the middle for the first time. But even with that enlargement, it's still quite a bit smaller than what you see on a lot of the most recent BMW models. Now this is the X-Line version, so it's the standard version. However, if you choose the M Sport model, that significantly changes the front fascia, kind of blacks out some stuff, and changes the lower fascia to be a lot more aggressive. Now coming over here to your headlights, these are the adaptive LED headlights. They are an option on the X1. The standard headlight is a halogen headlight. These have actually been redesigned this year to have the newest BMW design. And then down below that you will also find fog lights, standard if you get the convenience package or higher. Also typical of refreshed models, you've got some new wheel options for 2020. Now one of the things I really like about this X1 is that it actually comes standard with 18-inch alloys, and they give you the choice between a metallic finished one and a blacked out one for no extra charge. So these are 18 inches. The M Sport has another set of 18 inches to choose between, and then you have optional 19 inches on both models. And then as far as your mirrors, they do have standard heating, and then if you go for the convenience package, that's going to add auto dimming as well as power folding.
Alright, so walking around to this X1's rear design, I have to say I'm really quite impressed with how this looks. We just got through looking at the BMW X3, and honestly this looks pretty much identical, and that's definitely a compliment on something small like this. Now as far as the individual features are concerned, you do have fully LED taillights, which is a nice premium touch, and then down here on the bottom, this is one of the 2020 changes, is that the exhaust outlets has been enlarged by 22 millimeters, and they are these nice dual exhaust back here. And if you go for that M Sport model, it will kind of darken things up on this rear diffuser as well as give you dark roof rails. Now oddly enough, when it comes to the safety department of this X1, it actually comes with a lot more standard safety features as opposed to the higher end models like the X3 and X5. So all X1s will have standard forward emergency braking with pedestrian detection, auto high beam headlights, as well as lane keeping assist. And then if you want to option on adaptive cruise control with the active driving assistant, you can also get that as well. Well guys, that sums up the exterior of this X1, so let's go ahead and hop inside and see what they've done in there.
So on the updated X1, you will find their smart entry system on the majority of models, so long as you have at least the convenience package. And as you can see, this is their typical key fob. And then of course, to get inside the vehicle itself, all you have to do is just reach behind the handle since there is a sensor. Alright, now taking our first look inside of this refreshed X1, you will notice that the interior has mostly stayed the same from last year, but there are some changes which we'll point out as we go into the video. Now as the entry-level BMW, you do have some reduction as far as material and color options, but there are still plenty to choose from. So on the base model, you do have Sensatec Leatherette in your choice of black or oyster. And then if you go for the luxury package, you get the optional Dakota leather, which comes in those same two colors except with the additional option of mocha. And glancing over here at the door trim, it is fairly nice. You do have a soft touch plastic across the armrest as well as above it and along the top. And like I already mentioned, we have the optional wood trim, and we do have an aluminum door handle, and of course all four of your windows are one-touch automatic. As far as the seats are concerned, you do have a standard 8-way power adjusting seat. However, this model with the convenience package throws in 4-way lumbar support, and 2-person memory is standard. And like I was mentioning, this is the Sensatec faux leather, but it does feel very realistic. Now, as far as the interior material selection, I have to say it is pretty good, since BMW has kept the hard touch plastics reserved to the areas where you don't usually touch. So across the entire upper dash here, this is all a soft touch plastic with a nice double stitching detail. You have some gloss wood that runs all through the middle portion. You've got more soft touch plastic with a contrast stitching in this middle area. And they even have included a leatherette which runs all down through here on the passenger side. And like I said, some of the lower areas, they are hard touch, but everything fits together really, really solidly. Your push button start is located right here. Now, since they do have to include some reason for you to get the X3 instead of this X1, you cannot get the Live Cockpit Professional full digital gauge setup, so you will just get this more traditional, older style BMW setup where you have analog gauges, and then you have some basic information down here in the bottom that you can cycle through with this button on the steering wheel. Now, you can get a head-up display. Obviously we don't have it, but it comes in the premium package. And as far as your steering wheel, you're looking at the typical BMW steering wheel, of course leather wrapped across all the models. And if you went for the M Sport model, it would be the M Sport design with the paddle shifters. As far as adjustment, it is manual, tilt and telescoping. And then hidden right there is your heated steering wheel button. That is an option, standalone option across all the models. Alright, so let's go ahead and move into interior storage, where I have to say I am actually quite impressed. I say impressed because the console basically sets down really low. So when you open that up right there, you'll see you actually have quite a generous amount of storage for a vehicle in this size category, as well as a USB port. Now, this is two-tiered, so the top part opens up, and inside of that you have just a little space here to stick your phone on the wireless phone charger. And then up in the front here we have another storage cubby, 2 really deep cup holders, and a USB and 12-volt outlet. Alright, so now that brings us here to one of our 2020 changes, and that's that the physical shifter has been replaced by an electronic shifter this year. Now, this is the typical BMW setup, except that it's a little bit taller, just to compensate for how low this is. Of course, you pull back for drive. You can bump over here to the left to shift manually right here. Or like I said, if you have the M Sport model, you can use the paddle shifters. And then when you go into reverse, you will find the standard backup camera up here with both front and rear parking sensors, as well as active trajectory. Now, you cannot get a 360-degree camera on the X1, but you can get the parking assistant, which helps you both parallel and perpendicular park automatically. And then for park, of course, all you're going to do is just press the P. Right next to that, you have some buttons here for your drive modes as well as your parking sensors. And then you will also find your iDrive controller and your electronic parking brake. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on up the dashboard to our climate controls. And as you can see, this is a dual zone automatic setup. It is standard equipment across the board. We also have the heated seats. This is part of the premium package or as a standalone option, which is how we have it on this particular model. And it is worth noting that you do not have the option for ventilated seats. Then right above that, some people will be happy to know you have mostly physical controls here for your audio, as well as the audio volume knob. Now, on this particular model, we just have the standard 7-speaker, 205-watt system, but there is an optional 12-speaker Harman Kardon sound system available. But we'll go ahead and sample this standard one. I have to say, sound quality of this bass system is quite nice, and the average person probably won't need to pay extra for the upgrade. Alright, so now that brings us up here to our iDrive screen. Now this is one of the areas that has changed for 2020, because you'll now see that the 8.8-inch upgraded display is the standard display across all of the trim levels. Now, as far as the software that this is running, this is actually iDrive 6.0, so this is the slightly older version of iDrive than the newest version and some of the newest BMWs, but the functionality here is pretty much the same. I'm also happy to report that navigation is standard equipment, so that's pretty nice to see. And you also have standard Apple CarPlay, though Android Auto support has not been added yet. And then moving on up here, we have an auto dimming mirror with HomeLink universal remotes built into the bottom of it. This is part of the convenience package. And then also in the convenience package is this very nice panoramic moonroof. And as you can see, this is actually very large. It goes all the way back past the second row's headrest. And like I said, this is on the convenience package, so the vast majority of X1s will be equipped with a panoramic moonroof.
Alright, so hopping back in this X1's rear seat. First of all, I have to say I'm really quite impressed with how much space is back here. This doesn't feel much different than the X3, and that's certainly a big compliment for a class of vehicle like this. And as far as the feature set is concerned, here in the center we do have standard rear vents across all of the models, and we do also have standard USB Type-C ports for charging your phone. That said, however, you do not have heated rear seats as an option on this X1. And as far as the sliding and reclining, that is also a $300 option if you want it to be able to slide and recline. Now here in the center area, we do have a fold-down armrest with cup holders inside. And as far as the rear legroom itself is concerned, like I was mentioning, this is really quite large. It comes in at 37 inches of rear legroom and 39 inches of rear headroom, which places it above its main rivals like the Audi Q3. And behind rear seating position, I have probably 6 or 7 inches of rear legroom, which is phenomenal for this class. And it actually looks like BMW has raised this front seat off the ground to give you even more foot space, since this is probably more foot space than I have in pretty much any other car. So space was definitely a priority with this X1, and it definitely shows in this rear seat. Now walking up to the tailgate here, it is going to be hands-free power if you option on that smart entry system. So just wave your foot under the bumper to open it. And once inside of this cargo area, once again, I am super impressed by the amount of space that this X1 has to offer, since you're going to come in at 27 cubic feet of space behind the second row seats and 58 cubic feet with them folded. That makes it over 10 cubic feet larger than the Audi Q3 and not much smaller than the BMW X3 itself. So definitely a lot of space back here in this X1. And as far as it's finished, you do have a nice carpeting on the floor. And up underneath, you have even more additional storage that stretches the entire length of the floor, as well as a cargo cover, and the seats do fold 40-20-40 split. Now here at the passenger seat, you do have the same adjustment as the driver, and in front of the passenger, the glove box, it is a little odd here, but you do have actually a lot of space. It goes back quite a good distance, and it is felt lined in the front portion. And up top, we do have a sun visor with a light mirror, and it does also detach, however it does not extend.
Okay, so first taking off here in this X3, there have been some updates to the powertrain, but not to the engine, so we're still looking at a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. making 228 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, which are definitely class competitive numbers. It's actually exactly the same rating as the Q3 I checked. You know how Germans are; they often
to be honest with
try
you,
to match each other.
They
just exactly the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely class competitive to the new Q3 and the GLA.
And your first acceleration there,
Yeah.
it's not really, you know, like super powerful or anything, but it's also not bad. You know, it's pretty good.
And 0 to 60 is under 7 seconds. What is it?
It's 6.3,
Six-
so that's not bad.
That's actually quite good for something, you know, of this size and with the standard engine.
You know, and also something that I'm noticing just kind of taking off here is that, you know, this 2-liter engine is also, it's pretty quiet and refined. You know, a lot of 2-liters, especially in the more basic like models, can be a little loud and unrefined. And in this model, it does a good job. It's quiet, and that's really what you want out of a luxury 2-liter engine. You just kind of want it to blend in the background and give you your power without much drama.
Now earlier I said that the powertrain has changed a little bit, but not the engine, so that leaves your transmission. BMW has updated it for 2020. Now I haven't driven the 2019 X1, so I can't tell you exactly what's going on, but they did revise the shift algorithm, smooth things out. And definitely the end result here is a smooth shifting transmission.
Yeah.
You know, there's no hesitation or gaps between shifts. You know, and both accelerating and decelerating, you know, just performance is very satisfactory.
You know, just kind of riding along here, I have to admit, you know, this X1, we actually just got out of the X3, and I don't think that it really has too much of a ride quality sacrifice. We actually drove on back-to-back, the X3 and this, and it is a little bit firmer than the X3 in its ride quality, but I wouldn't say you're having too much of a sacrifice over that, which is pretty, you know, that's a nice thing to have, especially out of a, you know, their entry level. This is the cheapest BMW you can buy, and, you know, quite frankly, a lot of times when it's the cheapest, you know, luxury car you can buy, it kind of sucks, but, you know.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by the power. Like, it does not feel entry level at all. You would think that it would be, you know, quite a bit slower than it is.
You know, now that we're up to highway speed, I will go ahead and kind of give you some numbers to back up what I was talking about with the ride quality and see how its sound is.
Let's see, we're going 55 miles per hour.
And this road is pretty much rougher than most roads, so it makes the cabin louder, so it's not exactly a fair comparison to maybe some of our other reviews, but it looks like we're averaging around 61 decibels. So that compared to the X3 that we were just in, X3 came in at 58, so you're looking at about 3 decibels louder, and that car is extremely quiet, so pretty nice and quiet cabin in here. It's not as quiet as the X3, but pretty close.
So our auto start stop system has engaged here, so we'll go ahead and see how quickly it restarts once this light turns green. All right, yeah, very good, nice and smooth. You know, I didn't sense any hesitation, and there was no lag getting back onto the throttle, so
yeah, that's pretty good.
I'm happy about that. Now, I know it's not really the focus of a vehicle like this, but I do want to talk about the handling, because this is a BMW after all, and it's a front-wheel drive BMW, so you might be curious, you know, does it still drive well? Actually, the answer is yes. The steering is pleasantly firm. It's actually pretty heavy, which I like. And while in typical crossover fashion, you know, it's not like super, you know, showing you the road texture and whatnot. You know, you can definitely still tell where the wheels are placed. And as you can see, it is quite responsive. This isn't even the M Sport version. This is just your regular X line. You know, but I think it's pretty good compared to the competition. Like the XC40, for instance, has super light steering. So, you know, this is definitely on the sportier side still.
And the last thing that I do want to cover here is going to be the fuel economy. That's a pretty important part of anything, you know, in this segment of vehicle. And it comes in at 24 city, 33 highway, 27 combined for the front wheel drive model. And then if you go for the all-wheel drive, that's going to drop it down 1 mpg combined. So, you know, it's pretty good fuel economy. It's not the best in the segment, but it's also not the worst. And, you know, it's just pretty good overall.
So at the beginning of the video, I asked the question, you know, is this a good enough vehicle to lure in new customers and keep them around to buy more BMWs later on as they, you know, since this appeals to young people as they grow and their family gets bigger? And the answer to that question is certainly yes, and you should not be afraid to come and check one out.
Alrighty, so now let's go ahead and discuss the pricing for this X1. For the front-wheel drive model, that's going to start at $35,200. And then if you want the X-Drive all-wheel drive model, that's going to be an additional $2,000 for $37,200. And that does mean that if you're checking that out, this is actually the cheapest BMW you can buy. Now we do also have quite a few options checked off on this X1. So we have this optional beautiful paint. I don't know if we mentioned it in the review, but this paint is gorgeous. That's $1,200. Then we also have the convenience package, $2,550. Heated front seats and steering wheel, $550. Fine wood trim for $350, as well as LED lights with cornering, $950. Parking assistant, $200. Wireless charging, $500. Floating hubcaps, $155, and then the destination charge of $995 brings this one to $44,650, which is pretty much the higher end of the X1 lineup. But you know, you are getting a lot here, and this is a BMW for $44,000. So you are getting a lot here, as well as good exterior styling. Well guys, we've enjoyed watching this in-depth look at the 2020 BMW X1. We really appreciate you watching, and if you haven't subscribed already, be sure to help us out by hitting that subscribe button down below, and we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.